everybody. Before we start the session, we would like to have a big recall together, like 5 or 10 years ago. Never had we thought that we would stay all day long at home, put on masks almost everywhere, had ourselves screened through swab or PCR polymerase chain reactions to be able to take trips somewhere. Everything turned into sluggish move, paranoia gesture everywhere. We have witnessed a mass layoff here and there, collapsing of business, almost in all aspects of businesses, especially startups. Too many thoughts regarding how and what would happen to me and my future. What caused it all? Exactly. We don't forget about the COVID-19 pandemic. I myself was impacted a lot and made history as the first online graduate, like really after all those 3 years of studying, researching, writing and stuff, and then ended up just like that. But that is only a mini thing. That toll by COVID-19 helplessly rises. As a result, COVID-19 started being prioritized over other diseases that actually are still life-threatening in Indonesia. To name a few, tuberculosis, leprosy, some neglected diseases like dengue, malaria, and we don't forget about cancer, which supported by global trends, affect younger age below 40. All this report cannot be just less scary than that threat of COVID-19. And let's narrow that down into research area. You and I might have known that due to, again, COVID-19, other than COVID-19 topic of research receive less attention. I'm not saying no attention at all, but less attention, meaning less funding than that shown for COVID-19. And where does that lead us? Are we winning it already? Or at least come up with vibrant findings that will be the national pride of Indonesia and answer hope of our own people? I think we are not having that already. We are not having that yet. Are we coming into a realization that we should be firm on our predetermined directions and start organized research to be more sustained instead of just temporary and triggered by solely panic action towards something? Hence, these sessions highlight redirections toward national strength-carrying lab-based research to leverage preparedness against unprecedented outbreaks. We are so privileged by having 5 prominent profiles now, which represent different sectors: research department from Netherlands, state research institutions, private research institutions, the researcher as the actor of research themselves, and of course the director of research facilitation and rehabilitation of LPDP, Endowment Fund for Higher Education, that has been major research and higher education funder so far. And we are going to dig deeper on how they see this matter from their perspective in regard with their duties, accountability, and how practically they use the interest to assure the sustainability in their respective institution. And I believe we are all here as being thirsty to learn from them. And now I'm serving you as your moderator. I'm Ika Nur Laila, former LPDP awardee 5 years ago, and now research staff at Research Center for Vaccine and Drug under Research Organization for Health. This is a semi-panel discussions. Our speaker will be delivering their talk, and then we will be having a discussion afterward. The discussion will be among speakers or with audience. Everyone in the room has equal right to convey their query, right? Without much further ado, let's welcome our first speaker, Professor Dr. Annemieke Geluk, on stage virtually. I'm sorry if this is the problem of tongue, if I pronounce your name incorrectly. So let's have a look at her short profile first. You don't ask me about the publication. You should just Google Annemieke Helluck and you will have so abundant publication of hers. Over the past 30 years, Professor Helluck has made important contribution to the knowledge of immunity, again, Mycobacterium leprae and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Currently, her research focuses on global health, One Health, and is aimed at the development of novel tools and strategies to predict, diagnose, prevent, and better treat leprosy and tuberculosis. To accomplish this, she translates innovative basic research in immunology and molecular biology of mycobacterial infection to real application using longitudinal population studies in LMIC, Leiden, Leiden University Medical Center, if not mistaken, but also screening of animal, rat, squirrel, armadillos, and stuff, and analysis of environmental sources. So, Professor Annemieke Helluck, we can't wait to learn from you, and floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think now's the time to start my presentation. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Can you all see the presentation?
That's great from my end.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to the winner conference of this year. And especially since now everything luckily is opening up a little bit again, but it's very good to look back on the 2 years that whole the world has been in lockdown, and what all of the laboratories, but also the educational parts of the universities, how they have experienced this and how they have new ideas and overcome the pandemic. So I'm very happy to be here and to be invited here. And if we go to the next slide. I work at the Department of Infectious Diseases at the Leiden University Medical Center, and my research group focuses largely on the development of diagnostic tool, and for that we work a lot in the field where the leprosy and tuberculosis are endemic. And so I will discuss in this brief presentation a little bit about how the COVID pandemic, therefore, also has been a challenge for us to overcome in our research. Next slide. Okay, so the first thing I thought about when you asked me to present here and on the title of how we can, focus towards strength carrying lab-based research and redirect them in view of being prepared for next outbreaks, I thought of a WHO employee that was on the internet, and if you click on that link, please, that's below there, you can see what he is telling us, and this is always sticking to mind. Can you do that? No. Doesn't work? Okay. Well, what he is telling us, actually, if it doesn't work, I will just inform you about it. And so what he's telling us, he's an employee of WHO who's also worked a lot with Ebola. And Ebola, of course, was the great outbreaks were before the COVID-19 pandemic. They were, of course, a little bit different because of the pathology of the disease. But what he's told you told the world actually is that it's very important that we are prepared, but also if there are things for which we cannot be prepared because we don't know what's going to happen and what kind of new diseases may happen, then it's better to act quickly than to act perfectly. So the don't be perfect, but be quick. And I think this is something that stuck into our minds, also with our research and also with our education. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be quick. Otherwise, we lose and the virus wins in this case. Okay, please go to the next slide. So in my research, what I do a lot is work in the field together with collaborators in endemic regions. So we do a lot of field sampling and we biobank, and together or with the field staff, we do a lot of training. So and to capacity building on immunological techniques or pathology diseases, but also for the development of diagnostic tests. And this also includes a lot of sandwich PhD programs, meaning that PhD students from endemic area, they do their PhD within a project that is a collaboration with my group, and then they can do their PhD either in Leiden or in the region of their choice where they're working, at least to get some training both in the field but also at the universities. And of course, this could not happen either when we had the pandemic. So if you go to the next slide. So I had a grant that was acknowledged in May 2020. It was an NWEJO grant, which is a Dutch scientific organization. And it was a Science for Diplomacy Fund, meaning that it was a seeding grant to get to know each other and to try to do a pilot study in Indonesia together with a diagnostic test for tuberculosis that we had developed. Well, the collaboration together with Dr. Ati Suwarti at the Indonesian Oxford Clinical Laboratory of the University of Indonesia, we did a lot of online deliberation, and we tried to get to the point so that we could perform the grant. But it was very, very difficult for her because this project included also collection of samples from tuberculosis patients. And no tuberculosis patients were actually identified because everything was focused on COVID. So initially there was no possibility to go to the patients, to go to the TB patients, and also they didn't come to the hospital anymore. So there were a lot of problems. So what we did actually in this project, we asked first for a no-cost extension from the grants agency, and that was granted, luckily. But we also thought, okay, if this is the problem, if the other respiratory disease, besides tuberculosis that we wanted to investigate, if the other respiratory disease, COVID, is included in our study, then perhaps we can, continue our study. So that is what we did. So we included also a cohort of COVID-19 patients and also studied them. And in future, a PhD student from the institute, they will visit me and do the on a no-cost extension of this grant. And in addition, with another grant, they will come to my lab and also, besides TB patients, analyze the COVID-19 patients. So this is what we did to accommodate. So not to say, okay, we cannot do this grant, we cannot do this project, but what can we do? So thinking possibilities. And actually, for a lot of the field work that I'm involved in, either of TB or leprosy, we had as another group the COVID-19 patients. So this is actually the next slide also has another example of that. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. And so basically, the diagnostic test that we use, UCP lateral flow assays for TB and leprosy, pre-March 2020, so pre-pandemic, and the research was focused on a lot of population screening or doing triage for TB in endemic areas. And we could then do identification and point of care tests. Yeah, so actually at the point of care. And then if you go to the next slide, because that was not possible anymore, what we did after that, we collected a lot of samples in a joint collaboration with other LUMC employees. And that collaboration was called Beat COVID. So of many COVID patients, so severe COVID patients in our hospital, we started to collect sera instead. So instead of going to endemic areas for leprosy and TB, we started to collect serum of COVID patients in the Netherlands. But in addition, there were in 2020, in the summer of 2020, a lot of grant opportunities for COVID as well. So we thought, well, if we cannot work on leprosy and TB, we try to work on COVID. So together with other employees at the LUMC and people from African Institute, we started the EDCDP funded AIDCO consortium. And in this consortium, a lot of sera, but also other samples of COVID patients and their contacts were collected, banked, biobanked, and they are waiting now to be studied. So this is something that would not have happened if the COVID pandemic hadn't occurred. So we had quick ethical permission because that was really important, that we could quickly in those African countries collect the samples for biobanking for later study. So when a pandemic hits, it's always good that grant funding agencies will also think of alternatives and have possibilities there. So always look at that. So that was something that we did within the EDCDP IDCO project. Another project from EDCDP called the People Project, and that project was already ongoing, and it was a leprosy post-exposure prophylaxis project in the Comoros and Madagascar. And what we did is because the Comoros are islands, and because they were initially not affected by COVID, what we thought is we are going directly to collect serum of healthcare workers and see if we, using antibodies against SARS-CoV-2 in our UCP lateral flow diagnostic platform, can be used as a centennial for COVID. So as a centennial for the detection of antibodies against SARS-CoV-2, because then you can use that as a tool to see or to monitor whether COVID is going there. So what we did, actually, we used the same platform as we are already using for leprosy, but then applied it not for antibodies against Mycobacterium leprae, but for antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. So this was also allowed by the funding agency. So that is, of course, a prerequisite that the funding agency allows you to do alternative studies with the same budget, because all of these studies were no cost extension, no extra budget was provided. And then we had a similar study in the Netherlands called BCG Corona, and that was before there were any vaccines. And so we tried whether BCG was going to be a good vaccine also for COVID-19. So we also vaccinated healthcare workers in the Netherlands, collected their sera, and also tested them for antibodies so that we could compare it to the healthcare workers in the African islands of the Comoros. So these are some alternatives and some examples that we have worked with, and these are all well, no cost extensions, and including also COVID-19 patients with in addition to our initial TB patients or leprosy patients. And I think that's very important. And it's also important that the grant funding agency allow you to have this extra arm in the study, but also that they allow a no-cost extension, and that the ethical bodies, so the ethical organizations that approve of your study, that they act quickly. Because if you have to wait for a long, long, long time, then, a year passes by before you get approval, and then the study is not new anymore. So these are prerequisites to obtain to move to alternative ways to perform the studies. Okay, if you go to the next slide, then I will quickly also discuss some of the measures that we took in the laboratory. And of course, we restricted the number of persons that could be allowed in the work at this in the lab at the same time. So we mentioned that, and we had very good connections with all the members of the group, so that we could work in shifts in the lab. And for that, we had like an online calendar for all the labs to make it possible for people from home to make a reservation when they would like to work in the lab safely. Of course, we finalized all the in vivo experiments, so the murine experiments with the mouse work of TB, and we finalized also all the cell cultures and the bacterial cultures initially, because we didn't know what was going to happen. But for the workplaces, we also took, of course, we were mouse nose mask and 1.5 meter distance. We made paths in the laboratory, only one way. But one of the things, these are all obvious things that were done to protect the people working in the lab and to make it possible to work in the laboratory. But what was a problem was the laboratory consumables, because in June, so around summer, we saw that a lot of plastics that we use normally in the lab, either perform PCR or perform cultures, they were not available anymore. We could not order them anymore, and we could also not order them anymore abroad. So I think one of the things we have learned is to have like good laboratory consumables in stock. And then the next slide. Some other measures, of course, from working at home is do as much as possible at home, perform data analysis. So we did a lot of papers, and we took the opportunity and the time to write a lot of reviews. So in 2021, we had a lot of publications, but also we were a part of a lot of presentations online and laboratory meetings online to stay connected, because of course that is very important. In addition to that, to have still, to not demotivate the students, because the students were suffering a lot because they were sitting at home, did not have any interaction with their fellow students, and did not feel that they were part of research or that they were part of a lab work. So we organized, of course, a lot of symposia and summer schools, and try to get them interacted, but also social gatherings with certain games to keep in contact, because it's very important and that that they were still enthusiastic and still interested in research, and that they could still finish their PhD and could still finish their master or bachelor. So having good connections and putting a lot of energy in that was very important. But also we entered into a mindset shift, because for the students to be interactive, I think you should get rid of the hierarchy, but have good networks and give them something of ownership and engagement, so that they could also interact and they could initiate things. And I think trying to do that, and trying to do that in a transparent way, helped some of the students to get through that period, and to see, well, to try to flip over, to look into opportunities instead of looking only in problems. So that helped some of our students. The next slide, I'm almost finished, I think. This is an example of an online symposium that we organized. And it was nice of this symposium that we could also have like coffee breaks, but in the coffee breaks, we could go to a virtual meeting room and have like coffee sessions so that we could also meet and discuss our virtual fellow or researchers. And in addition, there were some random speed date sessions. So you just signed up for speed date, and then you were put into a room and randomly assigned to somebody else, and you just talked about research or about something else. So that was very nice of that online symposium. And the next slide, there's also an example of the summer school I organized with some Brazilian collaborators. It was an online course on data science in health and disease, and mostly on infectious diseases and genetics and metabolomics. And what we worked besides presentations, because of course the students got a lot of presentations online, and sometimes they lose their focus and they lose their interest. So what we also did, we divided the students in groups and had work group sessions, and they had to do some homework and then discuss that again in other work group sessions. This was in addition to some nice speed day sessions, also randomly, a Kahoot quiz on the course, but also on other things, and some music sessions. So this is trying to get, in this case, especially the Brazilian students, because while we were losing the regulations a little bit in our summer, they were still in lockdown. So after that, I had a lot of positive reaction from the Brazilian students, and one of them now is PhD student in my group also. So keeping in touch, I think, is very, very important for the students during such pandemics. And then finally, if you go to the next slide, I want to emphasize, of course, that this is something that we do together. And for quick results, maybe you can do some things by yourself. But in the long run, and to overcome things, especially in the pandemic, we need the input of everybody. So either high or low in the hierarchy, they work together. And I think this was very important to get every person's and everybody on board. So I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope this was what you had in mind, and I would apologize for some of the slides, but that was just because my original presentation was too large. Thank you very much.
So this was enlightening, because we come to know that one of your highlights is biobanking, but allow me to later, after the sessions, make a sample from all highlights that I can collect from all speakers. Thank you so much, Professor Animaker. Hello, I'm still struggling to pronounce your name, but yeah, thank you so much. And next speakers will be Professors Niluh Putu Darmayanti. Niluh Putu Darmayanti. She is chairman of Research Organization for Health, the National Research and Innovation Agency, you may call it BRIN. Previously, she was head of Indonesia Research Center for Veterinary Science. Her expertise and primary interests are virology, emerging zoonosis, and re-emerging diseases. Her achievement span widely, not only in the research and innovations, but also in leadership, as well as in high-impact scientific writing. Endowed by these excessive experiences, she's now in charge for diverse health and health-related research center, including Research Center for Vaccine and Drug, Egmont Institute for Molecular Biology, Public Health and Nutrition, and so on. So please welcome Professor Niluh Putu Damayanti. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Bu Ika. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you share my slide? Okay, thank you. Today I'm going to present about the strengthened global research capability to mitigate emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases. Slide, please. The world faces unprecedented global health challenges. COVID-19 continues to cause loss of life, human suffering, and economic and social disruption across the world. Hard-won gains against HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria are being reversed with devastating consequences for the poorest and the most vulnerable communities. Climate change and increasing conflict and displacement are affecting the epidemiology of existing diseases and facilitating the emergence of the new ones that have possibility. We will face the next pandemic threat. With population growth and the climate change putting increasing stress on global ecosystem, we will likely show more zoonotic spillover event where pathogens from the animals world become threats to human. We have the antimicrobial resistant problems. We face the increasing risk of being confronted with pathogenic threat impervious to life-saving medical tools such as antibiotic. We already see this with the drug-resistant TB, a growing global threat that is one of the leading cause of death of the antimicrobial resistant. Slide, please. As we know, the emergence and re-emergence of the infectious diseases continues to threaten of the health of the people worldwide. The world cannot manage the next pandemic with the tools tailored to the past pandemic. We need a new approach and a new way working with the partner from the across disciplines to control and minimize the risk of the pandemic. Ongoing 2020 global pandemic caused the SARS-CoV-2 further has the underscores that continual threat of the newly emerging and re-emerging pathogens and the critical value of research in pandemic preparedness effort and national resilience of health. Slide, please. Resilience as the ability to prepare for, manage, absorb, manage to adopt, and manage to transform and to learn from the shocks. The resilience is core concept is disaster risk reduction. It is application to health system is relatively new. It has been defined broadly as institution and health actors capacities and prepare for, recover from, and absorb shocks while maintaining core function and serving on the ongoing and acute care needs of their communities. During the crisis, a resilient health system is able to effectively adapt in a response to the dynamic situation and reduce vulnerability across and beyond the system. Experience from the previous epidemics such as Ebola, SARS, and MERS emphasizes the link between resilience and thwarting a new outbreak transmission. So next, please. The pandemic preparedness plan goals are built on a foundation of pathogenic-specific research that include advancing research on priority pathogens known to or having the potential for emerging as the public health threats. What we can do? So increase the research, especially to characterize the pathogen of concern and surveillance to identify threats before they emerge. we can continuing to build a robust basic research portfolio, and advancing translational science on this pathogen is essential for biomedical preparedness. Shorten timelines between pathogen emergence or outbreak onset and approval of candidate diagnostic and medical countermeasures such as therapeutics and vaccines. So, and the last one, this bridging the research gaps or eliminate existing gaps in research, infrastructure, and technology, as well as expand the preclinical and clinical testing capacity. Next slide, please. Most emerging infectious disease and re-emerging infectious disease have the zoonotic origin, denoting that the disease has emerged from an animal and crossed the spatial barrier to infect human. Emerging infectious disease and re-emerging infectious diseases are responsible for significant proportion of the infectious disease outbreak that have plagued humanity over the ages. On the slide, you can see, as we know, about 75% emerging infectious disease are zoonosis, and around 60% human infectious disease from animals. Emerging infectious disease are diseases that the newly recognized in the population or have existed but are rapidly increasing in incidence or geographic range. Meanwhile, the emerging infectious diseases are the diseases that have caused significant health problems in human that spread in a particular geographic area or globally during a previous time period, then decline greatly, but are now against becoming health problem or of the major importance. Slides, please. On the picture, so that 5 steps before the diseases can spill over to human and become human-to-human transmission. For example, for rabies, the disease on the stage 1 and the stage 2, it means that the disease only from the animal as a primary infection. Meanwhile, is IV on the stage 5. The disease no needed animals more to spread because the transmission on stage human-to-human transmission. Please, slide, please. Emerging infectious diseases and re-emerging infectious diseases cause significant impacts such as global mortality and morbidity, social geopolitical implication, economic burden such as COVID-19 pandemic or avian influenza H5N1 outbreak. Slide, please. So the best ways for future preparedness for zoonotic viruses and to stop the appearance and reappearance of the zoonosis need to understand the primary host range, the virus spillover events, the frequency of the infecting of the one host to another, and intermediate host. Slide, please. So for the future preparedness, we need the framework for the strengthening zoonotic diseases surveillance in remote rural areas that would facilitate integration into existing surveillance system. As you can see on the picture, we need the stake 1 to stake 6. Please, slide, please. And so we need the One Health approach to mitigate the risk of the emerging and re-emerging diseases. One Health is collaborative, multi-sector, coordinated, and transdisciplinary approach, working at the local, regional, national, and global levels with the goal of achieving optimal health outcomes by recognizing the interconnection between people, animal, plants, and their environment. Next slide, please. Through targeted basic and applied research on these prototype pathogens from each viral family of concern, the accrual of the solid foundation of the knowledge and the medical countermeasures such as therapeutic vaccine and monoclonal antibodies, will enable to rapid response when novel pathogen emerge from any of the viral families of concern. The preparedness research effort will provide the reagent roadmap for the product development, evaluation, scientific infrastructure, and study capacity needed for robust research response to a future pandemic. Slide, please. Obtaining in-depth knowledge and developing medical countermeasure for prototype pathogen within viral families that pose the highest risk for the epidemic or for pandemics. Preparedness for the major infectious disease outbreak will save lives. Rapid deployment of the effective diagnostic vaccines and treatments can contain an outbreak before it expands into the larger epidemic or pandemic. Slide, please. Characterize, develop, reagent, and conduct the preclinical and clinical testing of other pathogens that may not serve as the prototypes, but that nonetheless threaten human health, and thus are considered a high priority to study priority pathogens, developing research priorities, viruses most likely to cause significant human morbidity and mortality. Slide, please. The pandemic preparedness plan will support critical study to characterize prototype and priority pathogens, including understanding viral biology and structure, host immune response, mechanism of immune evasion, disease pathogenesis, and studies to develop assays and animal models of the disease. Slide, please. For the clinical research, we need to conduct research on pathogen biology, pathogenesis, and host immunity, fundamental knowledge of pathogen biology, structural properties, mechanism of transmission, including identification of viral factors, viral life cycle, viral entry mechanism, and host receptor tissues, tropism, and host immune responses is critical to effort informing the development of medical countermeasure against the new emerging or re-emerging pathogens. Slide, please. It is important to understand the function of the essential viral protein that will be necessary to structure guided vaccine design, identify viral target for the development of the effective therapeutic candidates, and develop the diagnostic and immunological assay. So support the coordinate the development and sharing of the reagent and resources to accelerate fundamental research and development of the vaccine therapeutic immunological assays and diagnostic. I think is important enough. Okay, slide, please. And the other hand, we need to conduct on focus on immunology and assay development, support the design and development of the serological assays that can serve as useful tools to evaluate medical countermeasure, including evaluating the immunogenicity of promising vaccines and effectiveness of therapeutic candidates. The assays can also identify correlates the protection, identify antigen-specific response to pathogens, and characterize a cross-reactive response to pathogens. Slide, please. Institution should leverage its expertise especially in infectious diseases, genomics, proteomics, bioinformatics, and access to clinical samples to develop rapid response diagnostic for biological threats and emerging infectious diseases. Slide, please. For the therapeutics, we need the effort to identify promising target for the intervention and generate novel therapeutics that are both the pathogen specific and have the broad spectrum activity, engage the pharmaceutical companies to to share libraries, medicinal chemistry, and drug development expertise to accelerate internal effort to ensure the most promising drug candidates progress rapidly into clinical use. For therapeutics, we need development of the small molecules and antiviral that may be useful against a wide range or class of the pathogen of concern, and recent advances in monoclonal antibodies. Monoclonal technologies have provided scientists with the valuable tools to prevent and treat infectious diseases. Slide, please. I think it's cross-cutting preparedness effort. So the appropriate research infrastructure capacity will enable effective pandemic preparedness and rapid response research. Animal BSL 3 and animal BSL 4 capacity can push the testing of promising candidate drugs and vaccines and mitigate the risk in the event of the pandemic. Preparedness includes leveraging and expanding existing domestic and international outpatient and inpatient clinical trial sites, enhancing on-site expertise, and developing the clinical research infrastructure needed to evaluate countermeasures and rapidly respond to infectious diseases. Slide, please. So we need the coordination and communication. Effective coordination and communication are central to effective preparedness research effort and requires a close collaboration. Intramural and extramural programs are harmonized, are supported by the effective mobilization of logistical, administrative, and technical resources. That's all my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Ibu Ika.
Thank you, Professor Indi. It was also interesting because you connect all related with health research, and we are going to assemble the headline again later on. The third speaker will be Mas Ono. I usually typically call him Mas. No, this is Bapak Dani Prakoso. He is a representative from Professor Nidam Foundations. Let me show you a little bit about his summary executive. He received the Doctor of Philosophy with major in veterinary medical sciences from College of Veterinary Medicine, University of Florida, United States, and a lot of achievement that he mentioned, but yeah, I think we can just focus on what he's doing. His expertise in the virology as well, isn't it, Mas? So, all floor is yours, Mas Dani.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Ika, and thank you very much for all of the speaker. So, good afternoon of the moderator and also speakers and audiences. I am Dani Prakoso. So, first of all, on behalf of Professor Nidam and the Professor Nidam Foundation, I would like to apologize for this last-minute change due to an urgent matter of Professor Nidam has to do today. So, okay, so today I'm going to talk about the research laboratories in Indonesia. It's our experiences, challenges, and perspective of a non-government and non-university laboratory like Professor Nidam Foundation. So, I'm not sure if I can do this. Okay, should change. Yeah. So, so I will explain about the general condition in Indonesia. As we know that in Indonesia, the research laboratory are dominated by government and state university laboratories. And then from there, we can see also that the funding are heavily rely on the government. And then from there, we can see also there is not really much regulation. There are some regulation about animal laboratory, and also there are some regulation about biosafety and biosecurity. But as we know that these regulations, they don't really enforce, meaning that there is no government body is going to inspect us and to see if we really do what we are supposed to do regarding these regulations. And then the availability of equipments and reagents, that's a major problem also in Indonesia. So we can see that most of the reagents and equipments are actually imported from abroad. So that is a major problem, especially during the COVID-19. And then also the maintenance issues. As we know that all of these equipments need to be maintained. For example, the pipetters we use in the lab, you have to maintain it. It has to be calibrated every year. So the question is how many times we calibrate our pipetters in the lab, and it requires a lot of money also for calibration. And then also for the equipment and reagents, if I come back again, that when we compare the price of reagents in Indonesia and in abroad, in Indonesia, the reagents is about 2 or 3 times more expensive than in, for example, United States. And it is quite reasonable because, for example, in the reagents for the molecular biology, like what we do, most of them are made in United States or made in countries in Europe. So in that case, if we have to import them to Indonesia, that's going to be importation charge, in the shipping charge, and everything. It make the price about 2 or 3 times more expensive. Yeah. Okay. Now to the next slide. So I will explain about a little bit about Professor Random Foundation. So Professor Random Foundation, it was founded in 2017 by young Indonesian researchers. And then the reason is because many young researchers do not have a place to express their talents in research. So we try to accommodate their talents at the time. And then our vision is to create an independent society atau nation, particularly in education and research in Indonesia, with a focus on science and technology for the well-being of the mankind. Okay, so this is our new location. It's going to be next year. And we also have the preclinical laboratory, animal PSL3. Yes, we are one of the laboratory which has this facility. Okay, and then next one is our activities are including knowledge empowerment, seminars, webinars, and we also have a YouTube channel. Okay, and then also we conduct a lot of surveillance, especially during the COVID-19. It's including the zoonotic viruses. That's our mainly work is zoonotic viruses, infectious diseases, COVID-19 in humans and animals. That's what we also do. And then we also conducted research, of course, and then in zoonotic viruses, infectious diseases, COVID-19, we did a lot also, and also in HIV. We also have a lot of publications, as you can see here on the bottom. There are some publications which written by us and submitted by us. And we also have we also submitted a whole genome sequencing of the SARS-CoV virus 2, which we obtained from our surveillance program. And we submitted to GSAID. And this is our facilities. We have PSL2, PSL3, animal PSL2, and animal PSL3, like the one in the picture in here. Okay. Okay. So, Professor Needham Foundation, we have 3 divisions or 3 branches. First one is the Lembaga Molecular PNF, or Molecular Diagnostic Service for Laboratory. What we do in here mainly, we do diagnostic of the human diseases usually now, and then for like now we do the swab for the PCR of the COVID-19. And then we also have the PADIA lab. PADIA lab stands for PNF Animal Diagnostic Laboratory. It's basically what we do is we receive samples from the clinician, and we do the diagnostic works, such as do the CBC for the blood, and then microbiology for the blood for animal. And then next one is we have we call the company is called Reset AIRC Indonesia. What they do is actually they do the clinical studies and also animal model provider. So we also provide animal models, and this is what our facilities in the animal BSL2, and yes, also no, I'm sorry, animal BSL3, and this all of also animal BSL3. And then we do have collaborations with the national collaboration, including University of Udayana, Universitas PGRI Adi Buana, and Universitas Diponegoro. This is what we do with them. So for the analysis of the Zeta Green. Zeta Green is a device which can eliminate COVID-19 in the air. This is the picture of when we did it. And then with Green also, yeah, we have a cooperation with them. And then pharmaceutical industry for preclinical study. So we have a cooperation with one of the vaccine company or with industry for the vaccine in Indonesia for clinical study. And I'm sorry, I cannot tell you which company it is. It is I cannot disclose that. It's a secret. And then we also have international collaboration, for example, with the Vaccine Formulation Institute in the University of Geneva, and the University of Tokyo, and University of Hokkaido. We usually perform like seminars with them. And then, so the question is that how did we establish our laboratory in 2017? Of course, it's not easy. First is the problem in the funding. We have to rely on the internal funding and external funding. So we rely on multiple sources. And we are lucky we got some fundings, either from the personal or from the grants from our collaborations. And then we had to choose location. We at first we only had one location, and now we have 3 locations. So it's rapidly expanding. And next year we will add the 4th one, which you show the picture before. And then we also have the SBA animal biosafety labs, which I mentioned before. All of them are outside this city, Surabaya. And then we get periodically add more reagents or equipments and reagents, addition of more laboratory, for example, biology molecular lab, hematology lab, protein lab, and histopathology lab, and all of the equipments inside our animal biosafety laboratories facility. And human resources, at first on 2017, we had less than 10 staff in the beginning. And then now it's about 30 staffs in our laboratory. And then we also provided internship programs for university students, fresh graduates, and some of them, how we usually attract those students are actually, we say that you can work with us after we finish if you are good. So that's also one of the things where how we can add more staff in our laboratory. And also we provide scholarship for prospective employees. We also always encourage our employee to do more study. That's what we do because we are research laboratory basically. Yeah. So this is sometimes it can be a challenging. The challenge is about how to keep them with us, not going out, not resigning after they finish their study. So that is some challenge we have to face in the lab also. But luckily we are quite good to keep them working with us. And then services. So it is not a secret anymore that research laboratory like us, the private research laboratory, have a problem in getting funding. To overcome that, sometimes what we do, we open a service, diagnostic service and research service. So what we do in diagnostic service, as we know that we are full of talents, and these talents we can channel them to do the diagnostic, because at least what we see is that when we perform research in surveillance, for example, and then we have a certain method to detect the disease, it means that we have a method for diagnosis also, and that's what we use for diagnostic services. So our methods are well designed, and then also we know how we work with it. Beside that, to be honest, if we look at the other diagnostic kits, it was based on the research also, right? So we as a researcher, of course, we can make the diagnostic kit and also provide diagnostic services. So that's what we do. And then we do a lot of promotion. That's an important also. We have a YouTube channel, for example, like this. We do regularly, almost every month. There is a new video from us which explain the new issues in the health in the world. For example, what we have in here is about COVID-19. We had about monkeypox, and we had a video about foot and mouth disease. And then now we're going to make another video about other disease, and maybe about there is a acute renal failure in the kids. Maybe we'll make a video about it. So this is all to educate the people. This is what we do also. And we also make webinars. There's going to be next webinars next week about histopathology, and if someone is interested to join, and you are welcome to do that. And then also in social media, we use social media a lot also in Instagram. We usually in Facebook, that's where we usually promote our programs. Okay, so now I will explain about our perspective on research laboratory in Indonesia. This is in general. So what we see is that the funding always be a problem, especially for research laboratory. And then that's why you must have a commercial services like what we do. We have the division for the diagnostic services, and then also we have to do collaboration, not only with the government, but also collaboration with industry, with the research center, and the university. This is like what we do with a lot of universities. And then also applying grants from government or research centers like BRIN. We actively applied for the grants which is administered by BRIN, and we are still waiting for the result for now. So that's okay. Yep. And then continuity in research. As we know, for a laboratory, and if it's private especially, when they stop working on research, then how we can survive with that? That's another problem. So we have to keep doing research. And the research is, we have to open our mind. It doesn't have to be in our main topic or what we usually do. It can be also in the different topic. For example, like in our collaboration with the Diponegoro University about the Zeta Green, there is actually from what they have the device, which we don't know how it works. I mean, no, it's not we don't know how it works, but it's a device designed by engineer. And what we know is we only know about the virus, and we try to collaborate. This is what happened. So that is another collaboration. And then regulation. As we know, for service laboratory, there is a regulation which we have to follow. However, not available for private research laboratory like us. So regulation only apply for the service laboratory, the diagnostic laboratory, but not for private laboratory for us. So we don't really see a regulation like that. It's just like voluntarily we follow the regulation, but we follow the regulation. And then for the maintenance, as I mentioned previously, that maintenance is a big issue in Indonesia. It's difficult for us to sometimes to get some especially sophisticated equipment to get maintenance. They have to call. They have to be sent to Singapore or somewhere. Sometimes Jakarta can do it, sometimes not, or that's a big problem also in Indonesia. And we have to follow in the lab. We have to follow the SOP for use and care, so our equipment is going to be long last. And also for maintenance, like I mentioned before, sometimes it's difficult to get the maintenance vendor in Indonesia, and the cost of maintenance, of course, it's quite expensive. And sometimes, to be honest, that these companies, they actually do not sell the equipment, but they do sell the maintenance program. So that's what actually they're selling. Yeah. Right. This is our take to strengthen the research-based laboratories for the next outbreaks. So we suggest that maybe the BRIN or some or other government institution to map the facilities, the research facilities, and then human resources and performance of all research centers in Indonesia. You can look at maybe by the how many publications they have. So you can see that each lab has its own capacities and what they can do, and that is also important for the continuity of the research. For example, that we have to keep working, if not on research or something. If not, then it's going to be useless. And we also suggest that for strategic value research, for example, like COVID-19 or for avian flu or for maybe for the electric car, BRIN will act as a regulator or safety net to assign laboratories in Indonesia to conduct research based on their expertise and capabilities of each research laboratory. Which means, what we mean here is that instead of asking us to apply for grants, but BRIN will assign us based on our expertise in the laboratory. That way, there are some chance that we will get the funding. If not, if we have to apply every time, there is a possibility that we cannot get the funding at all. And when it happens, there is no continuity of research and we are in the big trouble. So I think that is one of the way how we can distribute the amount of the grants the BRIN have. But of course, it's up to BRIN and also up to the government. This is only suggestion. And then we should prioritize to the surveillance-based research beside the research for final products. As we know, the surveillance is quite important. So we will know what kind of disease is going to come to Indonesia. So it's not just reactive, but we also do the preventive of the disease. Okay, I think that's all my talk today, and thank you very much. And also, we are open for collaboration with anybody. Okay, thank you so much.
That's so much that you mentioned about continuity in research, because if there is no funding, there is no continuity in research. I think we are in a good place because here we have Professor Indi, we have Pak Wisnu to address that later. Let's continue to our fourth speaker. Pak Wisnu, bear with us. We are going to fourth speaker, which represent the actor of the research. Actually, Masdan is also an actor in the research because he himself is researcher. Let me see. Let me introduce our fourth speaker. She is Dr. Ratih Asmana Ningrum. She is senior researcher at Research Organization for Life Sciences and environment. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Ratih, and she received her doctoral degree from School of Pharmacy, Institute of Technology Institute Bandung. I'm not sure about the terminology in English of ITB. And she received a lot of achievement, one of which was as National Laureate UNESCO for Women in Sciences in category of life science. So without much further ado, Dr. Ratih, floor's yours.
Thank you, Bu Ika. So, can you see my slide? Okay. So, hello everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity to share our experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. Okay. Sorry. So in infectious disease, a pandemic is the worst case scenario. COVID-19 actually is the sixth global health crisis since the flu pandemic in 1918, and forecasting that the global cost of the COVID-19 pandemic may already be as high as 16 trillion US dollar. So the pandemic has affected all aspects of our life, and especially it caused a high mortality rate. Globally, there are 6.5 million deaths as reported to WHO. Since the first COVID-19 vaccine applied, the rate of death and hospitalization decreased. A mathematical modeling study reported on September 2022 stated that vaccination prevent 14 to almost 20 million deaths from COVID-19 in 185 countries during the first years of COVID-19 vaccination. Next slide. So pandemic emergence has been entirely driven by human activities. There are 1.7 million undiscovered viruses in mammals and birds, and up to 800,000 of which could infect people. The same human activities that drive climate change and biodiversity loss also drive pandemic risk through their impact on our environment. Changes in the way we use land, unsustainable trade, production, and consumption disrupt nature and increase contact between wildlife, livestock, pathogen, and people. This contact allows viruses to cross over between species and spread more rapidly around the world. Future pandemic preparedness is essential if we are to find better solution to potential outbreak of either known or novel pathogen. If no action is taken, future pandemic may happen more often, spread faster, and kill more people than COVID-19. Next slide. World Economic Forum state that if we are to deal with pandemic in the future, then we need to look to solution for intractable global challenges. And we need many preparedness that comprise many elements. First, strong and resilient health system. Second, surveillance system and laboratory capacity, coordination across sector, legal framework and regulatory instrument, and well-functioning supply chains and equipment. So, but according to my capacity and today's theme, I will focus more on the second point of preparedness, laboratory aspect on pandemic preparedness. Next slide. So, lab-based research is very essential in pandemic emergence. In COVID-19 pandemic, after first fatal case and first international case, virus was isolated from cell culture and reverse genetic system developed. After WHO declares COVID-19 as a pandemic, the vaccine trial in humans was starting. Research response to COVID-19 cases is faster because of the previous experience of SARS-CoV-1. Research is also the basis for making a COVID-19 vaccine, which has now succeeded in reducing severity and mortality. Next slide. An outbreak caused by novel pathogen requires a rapid research effort across the experimental and clinical spectrum. As an outbreak responses progress, research and development continue to play an integral role at each stage. There are some crucial research topics which must be strengthened: pathogen identification and characterization, diagnostic development, drug discovery, and vaccine development. Next slide. So, previous slide, I'm sorry. Research Center for Genetic Engineering, we carried out various research activity and capacity building during the COVID-19 pandemic. We focus on mastery of key technologies. We realized that our capability needs to be improved as soon as possible. So the pandemic has taught us a lot to accelerate the learning process. In pathogen identification topic, we learn how to use the low-cost and rapid nanopore platform for whole genome sequencing of SARS-CoV-2. We were the first user of nanopore platform in Indonesia that submit the SARS-CoV-2 genome data to GSAID. We monitor circulating variant in Bogor and surrounding areas like Depok, Jakarta, and Tangerang. We report the first Delta variants in Depok, and the report became the basis for the policy on mobility restriction by the major. So we also joined as a member of COVID-19 sequencing laboratory network in Indonesia under Ministry of Health. We also perform a trial and error in primer design and synthesis using gene synthesizer. Usually we just order it commercially, never synthesized by ourselves. And also we develop colorimetric RT-LAMP methods. In parallel, also we carried out some research for pathogen diagnostic, such as real-time PCR, reverse transcriptase enzyme production, aptamer, and monoclonal antibody technique. In vaccine development, we are working with SARS-CoV-2 and other pathogens. We use a protein subunit platform and tried many synthetic genes in different hosts. We also learn how to establish virus-like particle, glycoconjugate protein platform, and also the mRNA platform. In drug discovery, we quite succeed in culturing the virus and creating a pseudovirus for anti-SARS-CoV-2 screening. So everything we have obtained certainly still need to be improved. Therefore, we need a collaboration from various parties so that we can master more technology. We hope that next year we can send young researchers to Netherlands on a PhD program to study more key technologies. Next slide. So as an effort to improve our capability, we applied training funding to the World Bank to obtain comprehensive hands-on training for pilot-scale vaccine manufacturing in Leiden. So here we are last year for 3-week intensive training. When Omicron hit Europe, actually, we received a very valuable knowledge that can be used and share where BRIN currently set up a CGMP facility. Next slide. Previous slide, yeah. When the COVID-19 started in Indonesia, not many laboratories were able to test SARS-CoV-2 virus. So that the government set up COVID-19 detection laboratories simultaneously in various provinces. But the problem is a large number of laboratory personnel are needed, but only few of applicants have experience working with pathogen. So we decide to organize a free training. Indonesia memanggil, it means Indonesia is calling you. The training focus on the principle of biosafety and biosecurity of SARS-CoV-2 and the detection of the virus using real-time PCR. We also invited the expert from university and Ministry of Health together with us to become a facilitator. 1,000 applicants reached in less than 2 days, so that registration may be closed early. We reselect applicants based on priority and divide participants into online and hands-on training. Actually, training in pandemic period is quite challenging because there is a mobility restriction, limited facilitator and laboratory capacity. We have to manage our time also as a daily COVID-19 detection team and as a facilitator. But this training was quite successful, and based on the feedback from the participant, the subject provided were very useful when participants work as COVID-19 laboratory personnel. So we hope that this kind of training can be carried out regularly so that more people understand the biosafety and biosecurity principle and able to perform molecular-based detection for pathogen. Next slide. So 1.5 months after the first case was detected in Indonesia, we start our COVID-19 detection. We form a daily detection team of researchers who volunteered to join the team. We made the standard operating procedure from sample shipment to lab result. We also provide rapid real-time PCR test for emergency cases. We made a biosafety level 2 laboratory and move the detection activity from BSL-3 to BSL-2 so that the BSL-3 can accommodate more COVID-19 research activity. There were more than 50 clinics and hospitals that collaborate with us. Next slide. Protecting ecosystem and biodiversity is critical to preventing future pandemic because ecosystem function similarly to the human body. When they are healthy, they are more resistant to disease. But when forests and other natural ecosystem are destroyed or degraded, sick and stressed wildlife are forced into closer contact with farm animals and people. So this created the condition for disease to spread quickly. Next slide. Research Organization for Life Sciences and Environment tries to play an active role in managing Indonesia's biodiversity. We have 4 main focuses: discovery, conservation, sustainable use, and protecting the environment. All these focuses are divided into 8 research centers, including Research Center for Genetic Engineering. Next slide. So together, previous slide, together with the Deputy for Research Facilitation and the Deputy for Infrastructure, Research Organization for Life Sciences and Environment will develop 25 research stations in Indonesia to carry out better biodiversity management. Next slide. So last but not least, it is very important to share key public health assets in outbreak preparedness. In line with BRIN's policy regarding open platform for infrastructure, we work closely with various parties in utilizing all essential infrastructure in BRIN. For example, biosafety level 2, biosafety level 3, animal biosafety level 3, genomic facility, specimen collection building, and others. All of these facilities have been used together with our various partners, both international and national partner. So we hope that all of this effort can contribute to preparedness against possible outbreaks in the future. And we are very open to all forms of cooperation with all institutions, both in Indonesia and Netherlands, to improve our capability. Thank you.
Dr. Ratih. So from speaker one, I think Professor Kellogg has a lot of support from the government, which is can be worth adopting by the system in Indonesia. So right now, alongside PRIN, we also have major funder in terms of research, higher education, and also research. I approached him long before this event, because I know that everyone for research can be separate party than funding. You got research, you need funding, and what is the funding? So where should I get it, and what to do to make my research to be prioritized in the national goal of Indonesia? So, Pak Wisnu, you have to address a lot of things here. Please welcome Pak Wisnu. But before that, I would like to introduce him in terms of professionalism. Bapak Wisnu Sarjono Sunarso with lot of institution, actually, not a single institutions. He's now the Director of Research Facilitations and Rehabilitations and former chair of education and training, and received the master degree from School of Engineering, University of South Australia, with major mining engineering. From engineering to engineer the fun of Indonesian research. Please welcome Pak Wisnu.
Okay, thank you very Ika. Thank you very much. I'm happy at the last my turn's coming for the presentation. Maybe my presentation not really connected with the pandemic something, but I'm happy to be here to share my knowledge. First of all, good afternoon from my colleagues in Indonesia, and then good morning to my colleagues and friends in Holland, in Netherlands, and on Europe. The best wishes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day for you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of the winner conference for invite LPDP, Indonesia Endowment Fund Organization, in particularly to me to be able to share information about the role of the Endowment Fund in supporting research, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak some time ago. In addition to this information, I will also confirm the role of the LPDP in managing endowment fund in Indonesia to build better innovation ecosystem. This is related to maybe the concept of triple helix, which is very closely forming the synergy between the actors. Next slide, please. Next, I will deliver the role of LPDP as a public service institution according to its assignment, namely scholarship services and then research funding. In terms of scholarship, the aim of LPDP is to form future leaders and professionals. Meanwhile, in the field of research funding, LPDP support increasing Indonesia competitiveness in the global area. Currently, LPDP manages 4 endowment funds, namely Education Endowment Fund, and then the second is the Research Endowment Fund, the third is the Higher Education Endowment Fund, and the Culture Endowment Fund. Next slide, please. The organizational structure of LPDP consists of a board of trustees, a supervisory board, and the board of directors. The board of trustees consists of a coordinating minister for human development and culture as a chairman. Okay, still here. And the Minister of Finance, Minister of Education, Culture and Research and Technology, and Minister of Religion Affairs, and of course the head of the BRIN. Next slide, please. LPDP contains endowment funds allocated from the APBN or state budget. Moreover, that is also possible to obtain funds from various legitimate sources. As a government investment operator, LPDP is allowed to manage these funds, for example, from CSR, philanthropic fund, etc. The proceeds form of management of these funds will be used to finance scholarship, research, and LPDP operational costs. Next, please. Currently, the endowment fund managed by LPDP is about Indonesian rupiah. It's about close to 120 trillion, or about 7.72 billion US dollar, starting in 2010, amounting about 1 trillion rupiah. It's a big amount of money. Next slide, please. As a scholarship manager, LPDP finances the master and doctoral levels for scholarship and partial scholarship, as well as the collaboration with other ministries, funding degree and non-degree scholarship. Meanwhile, the research funding LPDP carries out funding for the RISPRO program, namely RISPRO competition, RISPRO invitation, RISPRO international cooperation, and RISPRO mandatory. Next slide, please. In research funding, the operators are the LPDP itself, and then the Kemendikbudristek, or the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Research, and then, of course, the BRIN, National Research and Innovation Agency. Details of the programs as follows. BRIN will run the REEM, or Research Indonesia Maju. Kemendikbudristek runs applied research for vocation, scientific research for higher education. PRIME, cooperation with Melbourne University, and UKJIS, Indonesia, UK collaboration. Next slide, please. As current achievement of LPDP provides scholarship to 32,842 people with 16,000, 100 people having alumni status in the field of research. In the field of research, there have been about 1,670 research projects funded with total funding about $92 billion. Next, please. In relation to the extraordinary events of COVID-19 pandemic, the following area, the title of the research and the research institution. In this table, you can see the title of the research and the institution who held the research during last 2 years. Okay, next slide, please. Research funding in Indonesia, and then yeah. Next, I will convey the result of the study carried out with the KPK. That there are 3 important points. Maybe the last I will stressing. The most important thing is the lack of research meet industry and market needs. So maybe it is our task in LPDP to carry out more research cooperation with industry and marketplace, and then BRIN will support research to the researchers. Next, please. In addition, there are also research results which state that since 2016, the allocation of research budgets are increased, but the share of research activities funding is actually decreased. This is a photograph for the last 4 years. Next, please. For this reason, LPDP tries to shift the 3 circles that describe the actors in the triple helix from apart to coincide with each other and form a concept called balanced helix models. Besides that, it also invites industry and the business world to jointly funding the research. With this concept, one of the important things is that offer a tax reduction based on spending on the research, and this is called super deduction tax. And this has been supported by regulation of the Ministry of Finance number 153 in the year 2020. Excuse me. Next, please. On this slide, I will deliver some of the facilities offered by the risk flow investigation program, and this is expected to increase the desire of the industry and business sector to support it by resources to increase the need-based research activities. So Indonesia competitiveness increase, for example, long-term funding and does not follow the cycle of state fiscal budget. I think this is important because usually research funding by using the state budget start on January and finish on the December. It's not suitable for the research, but LPDP can provide funding across the fiscal years, and also LPDP can provide funding for equipment and so on. This is our, we call the luxuries of the LPDP's funding. Next, please. This is, I will say, in the following, I present the IRIS Pro information system platform that we are offered to use in research activities that can help make it easier to manage research funding and also make it easier to carry out monitoring evaluation from the initial selection of proposals to become prototype that are ready to be collaborated with the industrial sector. This platform also been adopted by the University of Riau, and which is currently processed by being finalized by ITS in Surabaya. We offer the researchers or the institution can use this platform to help manage the research funding. Next, please. This is my conclusion. Oh, yes. This picture shows that the triple helix concept with a balanced model has now been carried out by LPDP by involving the business and industrial sector and the universities and also the brain. We try to make them work together, also not work as a researcher, but they are also funding together. Next, please. This is my last slide, so I can finish less than 10 minutes. As a conclusion, we hope to work together with various parties to improve Indonesia competitiveness, and some of these we are offer, like here is we can offer our resources like information system and also research analysis and research project management in LPDP, and also flexibility of government investment operator welcome funding for research proposal and or project. I think that's all from me. I hope you can understand and enjoying how to manage research funding in Indonesia to help to serve Indonesia better. Thank you very much.
So lovely, Pak Wisnu, for that. So funding management. So let's go back to Professor Animike Heluk. So because yes, why we have so far, we can deny that some countries belong to advanced or developed, some are still developing. And what you can tell to us that you feel that's great support from government beside your own creativity to assure sustainability, that given your research is not actually primarily COVID-19, which is being so prioritized everywhere, but you assure that you maintain it very well. You're so creative, you're prominent so well, and also your laboratory is now a reference for Europe in terms of tuberculosis diagnosis, isn't it? So what would you suggest us to follow that path if we want to make sure that?
Well, I think first of all, my laboratory is not a reference for tuberculosis diagnosis. It's
leprosy.
a leprosy. Yeah. So it's the reference laboratory for leprosy diagnosis in Europe and in the Dutch Antilles. Anyhow, another remark you made previously between the talks is that we are mostly government funded. This is also not the case. My lab is 99% project funded. So if we don't have projects, if we don't have funding, external funding, especially for infectious diseases, this is the case, and then we cannot continue. I mean, the laboratory structure, the building, some apparatus are in fact, government funding through the hospital, university hospital. So one thing that was done quite quickly, and in which the government did play a role, is organization of funding for other for COVID, but then from other expertise. So to provide funding, which of course came from funding that were previously provided to other disease research. So what they did is provide an opportunity that was both necessary in view of the pandemic, but also an opportunity for researchers to work on another disease while sustaining measurements for COVID. So that is what they did. Another thing is, of course, the ethical permission that I mentioned also. This was quite crucial. So all of the universities usually take a lot of time to review all the applications for ethical permission. And this was quite quickly done now. It got prioritized, so we could really study quickly. And this is eminent. So, and this was unfortunately not the case with all collaborators that we work with. So I think this is something, in case of a pandemic, you have to move fast. That is also why I wanted to show you that short video of the WHO employee who asked that based on his experience with Ebola. You have to move fast. It may be not perfect, but you have to move fast. Well, that's also the case for ethical permission. You have to get priority in case of pandemics. And this is what was done at the universities. So it got prioritized. Yeah.
So what about the priorities? I mean, as you represent the private sector, Dr. Dani, so what do you think about that ethical clearance? Is it getting, what is it, easier or still struggling? Because I heard a lot about that. That's ethical also, the ethical clearance also a problem because we work with human samples, infectious samples that potentiate some transmission, disease transmissions, among others. What you can say about that?
It's me. Oh, did you ask me? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes.
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 Yeah. So for ethical clearance, as you know, that for animals, for example, we have the ICOC. ICOC stands for Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. It is only institutional. So we have our own ICOC, and then there is no national ICOC commission. So we make our own ICOC, and it's okay. It won't happen like that always. So we don't have any problem. So we send our staff to study how to properly do all of the ICOC's procedure using AALC, ELAC, and then also Indonesia has the kind of committee but still we make our own iCook. It's the same. Erlangga University also do the same thing. University of Florida also have their own iCook, but the difference in the United States, they have the National Commission, which will always do some kind of like a inspection to university, but here is not. So we are okay. And then for in terms of the services, like for a human diagnostic, we just follow the rule regulation from the Ministry of Health. So that's what happened in Indonesia for diagnostic, for human, for services, and there is a commission for a human, but for a research in a human, I'm not sure because we don't do a lot to human, but we do only a diagnostic, and unfortunately I cannot tell much about if we do research regarding human, what we should do. There's a bioethic committee, I think a national bioethic committee for human, but for animals, I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure. It's only institutional, and it's okay. So that's what we still working on. Yeah.
So what I can highlight is we don't have any problem with the ethical principally we have, but not quite principle matters. But then again, the opportunity about the scientific finding that you also mentioned that why I can say specifically to BRIN, right? Because that's what you have alluded in your presentations. If we kept, I mean, the private sector, if we kept making proposal on and without any assurance that you will get it, so it's kind of sometimes competition is not fair, even though everyone will put their best to win that, to secure their funding. So I think that's related with the position, leadership position to Pak Wisnu, also Prof India, how to separate the funding, this amount of money to private sector to do their own stuff without that typical process submissions, submitting proposal and waiting for the results. And we never know, there may be conflict of interest, who correcting who reviewing who, and stuff like that.
May I answer first? Ika?
Yes,
May I?
please.
Yeah,
please.
Of course, LPDP should serve for whole nation, not only for the government institution, but we also serve private sectors. That's why I mentioned in my presentation that private sector or industrial sector or business sector who can use who spend their money for research, they can get super deduction tax. Means we try to increase Indonesian private sector to do research funding to help the government and help the nation. And for us, we manage the endowment fund for research, and we send the money as a result of investment to the BRIN, and then run the program you call Research Indonesia Maju. The money come from the LPDPs and let the BRIN do the selection and choose which proposal they will funding. But LPDP itself, we still do the same, but we focusing now on the private sectors and industrial sectors. I think that's all for me. Maybe Ibu Indi will complete all.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Ika. I think BRIN tried to separate the funding from the outside or from the internal BRIN. So by system, BRIN have to construct the system. For example, if the funding from the outside or the funding from the internal BRIN, each OR or each deputy have to separate the account bank. We call the RPL, and so if the scientists got getting the funding from the outside, and they can communicate maybe with the research center or the research organization, or and then the administration from the research organization can give the advices what's the kind of the funding. So so I think the system till now going to better than from the perform from the our from the our ministry before.
Oh, meaning we are going to be better, and that's an opportunity to allow others party other than outside brain maybe to arrange research. That's what I took from your statement. So, Dr. Ratih, what's your thought about it? Are we prepared enough? When one day? I think this is not about prediction, but there's a will always happen at least one decade that we are going to face something new. But yes, COVID impact us a lot because it's something to do with it contact directly to humans. Whereas the avian influenza, we can overcome it easily, relatively easily than COVID-19 because that's something to do with animals, not directly to humans. So, Dr. Ratih, what you take about are we prepared enough when, based on your research, if one day outbreaks happens? So, what are we at that time in future?
Okay, thank you, Bu Ika, for the question. But before I answer this question, I would like to put some additional information about the funding in BRIN. Actually, Pak Dani, as a BRIN researcher, there is no privilege also for getting funding from BRIN. So I also propose many proposals to Riset and Inovasi Indonesia Maju, and then failed also several times because there is there is no privilege. So like Pak Handoko, chairman of BRIN, said that we have to compete with national institutions. So we also propose the proposal, and the selection is also the same. Actually, there is many scheme for the research, not only RIM, but also there was like for preclinical and clinical assay. And then you mentioned before about your laboratory that do the commercial testing. I think I really appreciate it, and I think you can propose also like a funding for startup, because it is more like for the private sector. So we can collaborate. You can collaborate with a BRIN researcher and then propose funding. And like Bu Indi said about the internal funding, we also have a scheme like a rumah program. Rumah program is given using the internal funding in each research organization, but it is more like seed money. So it is not much. It is just seed money for us to collaborate with other researcher from outside BRIN. So I'm very happy to meet you here, Pak Dani, so we can collaborate in the future. We can propose research proposal together. Okay. So your question, Bu Ika, actually we cannot predict
forecast. Maybe not predict forecast.
Okay, the forecast. I think Bu Indi is more expert to answer this question. Yeah, but because it is if there is no action for the biodiversity loss, this pandemic could come. We can get it more frequently and more faster, and then maybe it is not 10 years period, maybe it faster. So that's why we have to prepare in every sector. But in our experience, maybe when it comes, we have something experienced from COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it is not as bad as before, because we have experience how to respond the pandemic, and we also already learn how to identify the pathogen, and there are many researchers also that get the biosafety and biosecurity knowledge. So yeah, I hope that if it is coming, we have more knowledge and also more regulation to face the pandemic.
Right.
Thank you.
Got your maybe final words from Professor Indi. Are we ready enough for future challenge?
Okay. Till now, we cannot predict the pandemic till the pandemic it happens. So I think if as you mentioned before regarding the avian influenza, maybe will be next once the re-emerge as disease as re-emerge again in the world, and I think we in brain have a capacity and capability to, I think, to can early detect, because we have the I think it's a very convenient infrastructure to conduct to research to detect how to characterize the pathogen till the genome characterization. Maybe Pak Burati is expert in genome characterization, I think, and then maybe we can do further research doing for the using the animal model in the BSL3 laboratory, and we know on progress we have to animal BSL3 for the macaca and something like that. So I think we are more ready to next pandemic day once. I hope so, Mbak Ika.
Right. None of us expecting the same for that, but yeah, we need to be prepared for the worst and expect for the best.
Yeah,
What we can,
as you know, in the past, a pandemic happened is 100 years per year, and then you know it's 10 years the pandemic happened since the SARS and MERS and Ebola, and the it's nine. Sorry. It's 1N1 pandemic and something like that. Is this really, Prof. Anamika?
Yeah, well, everything in the future is hard to predict. And
Yes.
so that is what a famous chemist already mentioned. So yeah, I think we could try and do our best, and of course have the lessons learned, but based on that, continue. However, there's one thing before I have to go to another meeting. I would like to also bring to the attention that we did not address the environment and the climate in the context of the pandemic. Of course, when the pandemic was ongoing, everybody needed personal protection, and there was a lot of waste, not only in the diagnostics but also in the personal protection. Since then, we also have a green team in the hospital that collects all the material, and divides them into recyclable materials. So I think this is something that we do have to learn, because basically probably gets down to the fact that we are with too many people on this earth, and we are polluting it too much so that we get these pandemics. So maybe also some more attention to the environment in research would be useful.
It was so lovely. So we come into our highlight from all 5 speakers, that what I can say, we need to be wisely responsive toward challenges before us, be that outbreak that we might never think of it before. But we should assure that what we have run are not left meaningless. Therefore, performing parallelism, that's best exemplified by Professor Anemika. But we must do something about COVID because it's happening, but we also run it all together with leprosy, with TB and stuff, so that we can got everything all together. And don't forget about the sampling and stuff, about biobanking development and management, because from that we can learn a lot, and actually that's resources for predictions as well. And performing parallelism in research meaning carry what long term we can reach, and what in short term we can achieve. And I think that's to reach the resilience in research, which determine the preparedness. Government triple helix, as mentioned by Pak Vishnu, between government, private sector, and industry need to work side by side. I think I don't have any more enlightening days before today. So thank you for 5 speakers. I personally learned, but I think all the audience can get a lot of information and wisdom, if I'm not exaggerating. So wisdom as well from all of your talk. Hopefully we can meet again in other events organized by what's winner again, Nasonavik, in very near future. And if you don't mind, maybe I also want to email you personally later on, because that's very fantastic day. Thank you so much, speakers. Take good care. Pandemic is still here. And shall we close? And we are closing our sessions right now. Thank you so much for attendance. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.